was a wood construction steamer, 19th century vintage, built in 1893.
It is a major vessel whose story has cruised and built and changed over the years.
It has just been an extreme mystery to local communities here for over 100 years.
It is a chilly but calm January 21st, 1895.
The Chicora was leaving Milwaukee, heading back to Benton Harbor on a Monday mid-afternoon, and it was carrying flour.
A crew of 23 heads home to West Michigan, just as word was coming in.
A small boy was sent out with a note for the captain, and he ran down the dock, and the Chicora had left about 5 minutes prior to getting the notification of the storm. Nobody expected it to sink. Had the timing been a little different and the message reached them, the Chicora never would have left port knowing that such a big storm was brewing.
It's believed Lake Michigan swallowed the ship, leaving an appetite on shore, an appetite for answers, an appetite that lingers 107 years later.
That appetite drove researchers with the Michigan Shipwreck Research Associates, the MSRA, to set out on a quest to find one of Michigan's most sought-after shipwrecks, the Chicora, lost off the West Michigan shore during a storm in 1895 with the loss of all crew and captain. Searchers believe their commitment and diligence paid off on May 25, 2001, when after 4 seasons of searching, utilizing the services of renowned local shipwreck hunter David Trotter, they discovered what they believed was the Chicora, a wooden hull steamer 230 feet long, resting quietly on the bottom of Lake Michigan in nearly 300 feet of water. It was over 1 year later, after numerous excursions to the site with remote cameras and highly skilled technical divers, that they discovered the wreck was not the Chicora, the ship they had spent so much time and effort to locate. It was in all likelihood a cargo steamer called the H.C. Akeley, itself a long-lost vessel of historic significance and one in which the team had an interest in finding, but second only to the Chicora. This discovery and subsequent work on identification and documentation, however, would provide even more obstacles and challenges than the 4 seasons of searching. MSRA researchers, who were then members of the Southwest Michigan Underwater Preserve, set out to find the Chicora, West Michigan's most famous missing vessel. This was a difficult mission in which they devoted 3 seasons combing the lake bottom with David Trotter at the controls of his side scan. A total of 70 square miles was covered, with no shipwrecks being located. The 4th season was different, however. A new member would join the search team and introduce never-before-utilized techniques to pinpoint the location of this long-ago wrecked vessel.
When I first heard about this search, quest for the Chicora, I was fascinated by the scientific methodologies being used, side scan sonar, wanted to learn a little more about that. As I investigated further into the historical records, I realized that it would be possible probably to employ more of a scientific approach using search and rescue or search theory.
After being given initial encouragement by the Chicora team, Jan started his research.
In looking into search theory, I realized it was a complex thing. I first tried to contact the Navy, and they were, of course, a little hard to get a hold of. But I found it quite easy to get in contact with the U.S. Coast Guard Research and Development Center in Groton, Connecticut.
Jan contacted Art Allen, who works out problems in drift theory to aid the Coast Guard in its search and rescue operations. Using computer simulation technology, he's able to make predictions as to where objects drift in the water, given certain wind and current conditions. Applying this technology to the missing Chicora seemed an intriguing idea. However, to do this, he needed to have a meteorological profile of the lake at that time, including wind, currents, and waves.
Art knew that I did this type of work and I was the person to contact for it. So I said, yes, I'd be willing to take a look at it. And he said, well, there's only one problem. The ship went down in 1895. I said, well, that could be a problem because the work that we do to simulate the currents depends on knowing what the meteorological conditions were. So the first step was trying to find out what meteorological conditions were associated with the event and trying to recreate the weather from that period.
At first, this seemed to be a daunting task for Jan. However, after searching through a number of archival sources which held the United States Life-Saving Service and records on the development of the National Weather Service, he came up with the gold.
I made contact with the National Climatic Data Center. After some ferreting around, they did find, in fact, the actual weather records for the ports of Chicago, Milwaukee, and Sault Ste. Marie. And it gave very good coverage for the entire month of January 1895.
Jan learned that a joint congressional resolution was made and passed by Congress in 1870 to establish the National Weather Service, the first governmental agency to track the weather, keep records, and make predictions as to approaching weather. The National Weather Service, as it was initially called, later developed a branch called the National Climatic Data Center, a division of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, we all know as NOAA, in what amounted to nearly 18 months of research and joint effort of Jan Miller, David Schwab, and Art Allen. Using NOAA weather records from that week in 1895, they determined an area of scientific probability in which to look for the Chicora. Many simulations narrowed down the area. One of the final simulations put the debris just where it was reported found. The drop point was 15 miles offshore from Saugatuck.
Certainly, we knew we had additional information. It still remained to be seen whether we'd be in the right area because the area to be searched still represented an enormous new area that could have taken 3 or 4 years.
They first started with Jan Miller's highest probability sites. Using Jan's boat, the Merrilee, the team spent 3 full days searching the areas. On the 4th day into the search, Friday, May 25, 2001, it happened.
We were searching for several hours. At about 3:30 in the afternoon, Dave Trotter yelled, "Bingo, that's a shipwreck." And we had a beautiful, beautiful looking image in the side scan sonar paper. Dave pointed to it, and everybody on the boat knew immediately that we had a very significant, sizable wreck.
Now came the process of identifying the target. The team knew the wreck was about the right size, and it was near the middle of the search area. But was it the Chicora?
Identification of shipwrecks 15 miles out from shore and 275 feet of water can be very difficult because the weather and the waves out that distance from shore can be more aggressive than inshore. The depth causes divers problems. It's more risky. Our original plan was that if the ship was found in deeper waters than safe diving allowed for sport divers, we had intended to use remote survey methods, ROV or drop camera, and the state archaeologist John Halsey agreed with us and encouraged us strongly to use remote survey methods because he felt that would have less of an impact on the site.
While the state of Michigan's Bureau of History and Department of Environmental Quality have ultimate responsibility for the ownership and management of the state's shipwrecks, they have no staff or budget in place to solely deal with the new shipwreck discoveries. And as a volunteer organization, MSRA has limited equipment and financial resources, but they did have significant contacts and resourcefulness. After the team exhausted options over a period of more than a year for participation by commercial operators, equipment manufacturers, and local experts, Jan Miller turned again to the agencies that assisted with the search.
Dr. Schwab from the Great Lakes Environmental Research Laboratory opened a file to have Guy Meadows at the University of Michigan bring in their remote-operated vehicle to finish documentation on the site.
Previous commitments wouldn't allow the ROV, called the M-Rover, to be available until October 2001. During the long wait, the team gathered research on a number of vessels that could be the newly discovered wreck.
The target we had found was between 220 and 240 feet long, and we hoped we had found the Chicora. However, we knew it could be any number of ships that had gone down off of Saugatuck, Michigan. So we compiled a database of 6 different ships of that general size that were presumably lost in the West Michigan area.
The Alpena was built in 1866. as a wooden sidewheel steamer and was 197 feet long. She foundered in a storm in 1880 and all of the almost 80 passengers and crew perished. Some wreckage and a cargo of apples washed ashore in Holland. Even a leg of a grand piano was found. But after studying the side scan images, the team ruled out the Alpena because there was no evidence of a side wheel. So, 1 down and 5 to go. The Andaste was unusual in the Great Lakes. She was a steel-hulled whale-backed self-unloader, 246 feet long and the longest among those on the list. She foundered in a storm in 1929 and all 25 crew members were lost. Not a likely candidate due to her length, but it remained on the list. Built nearby in Grand Haven, the Healy C. Akeley was a wooden bulk freighter, 230 or by some accounts 240 feet long. Returning from Chicago to Buffalo in Building C's, she took the disabled tug Protection in tow, but had to cut her loose when the Akeley lost its rudder. She anchored, but fell into a trough in the waves and sank, killing 6 of her 18-member crew. The survivors reported she had gone down 9 to 15 miles off Holland. The Hennepin, a 209-foot-long wooden passenger and freight ship, was built in 1888. Like so many of the other ships, it was caught in a storm, this one in August of 1927, and was reported to have sunk a few miles off South Haven. No lives were lost in this disaster. The Michigan was built in 1881 by the same company as the Chicora, the Detroit Dry Dock Company, and was a 204-foot-long bulk freighter. This ship had an iron hull designed to handle winter conditions. Unfortunately, the ice in 1885 was severe and the Michigan was trapped in an ice floe for almost 40 days and sank due to hull damage. All of the crew was rescued when removed by a tugboat. And of course, the Chicora, a 219-foot-long steamer lost with all hands somewhere between Milwaukee and St. Joseph in 1895. Debris from this vessel was found ashore between Saugatuck and South Haven. With database in hand and the knowledge that M-Rover would not be available until October, the team turned to their own methods to acquire remote video documentation of the site. A marine expert from Chicago's Underwater Archaeological Society of Chicago brought his drop camera. Since a drop camera has no propulsion of its own, they developed clump weights with anchors to secure at 4 points far off the wreck to be used as a pole system to hover in position over the wreck. The first video glimpse of the discovery indicated a wooden hull vessel and a side cargo opening. They compared the video to the Chicora photo.
And our eye was also drawn to the series of fenders along the side of the Chicora, and we realized that we had probably seen a fender in that first piece of video.
While the team could certainly not be sure this was the Chicora, these first few minutes of video ruled out 2 other ships. The Andaste and the Michigan were clad in steel. The video clearly showed a wooden hulled vessel. Now it was 3 down and 3 to go. After the initial drop camera images were acquired, the team decided to purchase their own drop camera with special lights designed by team member Bernie Harris. A pulley system was devised to keep the camera positioned properly.
We did a drop camera video and photographed as best we could many of the elements of the ship, including hatchways, engine mounts, some of the boilers, and we even saw a capstan and something we think might be the toppled over smokestack.
In what amounted to a total of 45 minutes of underwater video acquired by the team and the sighting of a number of elements consistent with the Chicora, the team began to suspect that it was the Chicora. While none of the features seemed inconsistent with the Hennepin or the Akeley, the 2 remaining possibilities were reported to have sunk far from this position. The Akeley was 10 miles to the north and the Hennepin 22 miles to the south. It seemed impossible that the historic records, especially of wrecks in which crew members survived to tell the tale, could be wrong.
Given the scope of the strands of evidence that were pulled together, and even the small amount of video that was done, I think I feel the same as most of the team members do, that they're 90 to 95% sure that this is the Chicora.
Once again, the Chicora was in the headlines.
For more than 100 years, people have been looking for the Chicora, a ship that sank off the coast of West Michigan. And News 3's Kelsey Carlson talked to a group today that thinks that they might have found the Chicora. What an interesting story.
Very interesting, and people have been looking for this for a long time. A nonprofit group called the Chakur Preservation Society says it has found a ship of some sort off the coast between Holland and Saugatuck. It's in about 300 feet of water, and certain clues lead the group to believe that it is the Chicora. The group wants to preserve the ship as much as possible and leave it intact below the surface. It will not disclose the exact location, concerned someone will try to tamper with it in the meantime. The next step, Judy and Jamie, is to get a little bit better camera equipment down there, something that the group can control so they can make sure that this is the Chicora.
Weather set in early October, and with it, the cancellation of the M Rover operation. Another operation would be set for the spring of 2002, but that would be 6 months away. At this point, after so much media attention and public interest, the team set off to make presentations across the Midwest to tell the story of the search and discovery of this shipwreck. In the course of these presentations, MSRA applied for and received a grant from the Great Lakes Shipwreck Research Foundation to further study, document, and preserve this wreck.
The Great Lakes Shipwreck Research Foundation's original purpose when we founded it was to help preserve newly discovered Great Lakes shipwrecks and make sure that they were properly documented. We were kind of saddened by many of the recent discoveries where the shipwrecks were rapidly pillaged after they were found. When we heard that the Chicora may have been located, we naturally were very interested in seeing that the work, that proper archaeological conservation be done and that the site be documented well. And so we felt that it was an ideal candidate for one of our Ghost Ships Awards, which are annual grants that we give out to organizations involved in research, education, or conservation concerning historic Great Lakes shipwrecks. We hope to see the wreck identified.
To comply with the grant, MSRA began to consider other options for documenting the site in the event the M Rover operation was again canceled. MSRA turned to local technical divers Charles Larson of Oceans Sands Scuba and Doug Welsh of Fen Valley Wineries, who are the foremost deep divers in West Michigan.
Let's go on a dive to 300 feet in Michigan on our newly found wreck. Our bottom gas, dual 100 cubic foot tanks, provide us with the gas that we're going to use at depth. But it's not all that we need. We also need our travel gas, which allows us to get to the first 100 feet, and then switching over to our bottom gas. On the way back up, we switch again to our travel gas, and then at the last 30 feet, we switch to our decompression gas, getting the highest partial pressures of oxygen that we possibly can. Now, to compound all of this, in order to go down and actually capture pictures of the wreck, you have to take a video camera with you. And these video cameras are awkward and they interfere with the operation of all of your other emergency equipment. So you practice and practice, hundreds of repetitions until you don't have to look, it's just feel, touch. Everything has to be executable within 5 seconds, or it could be a fatality.
It all actually began last fall, or last spring, 2 springs ago, when you called and told me that you had found a wreck, and then I came and started to gear up myself, and Chuck was quite interested in what was going on, and so we decided that we'd train and prepare ourselves for some of these deep wreck dives. I took, from the very beginning, I took the attitude that I wanted to preserve the wreck, work with the state, and not in any way disturb whatever was on the bottom, and just to be consistent with the wishes of the group. So as the plan evolved, then I basically trained with and went down with the idea that nothing was going to be disturbed.
Once again, the M Rover operation scheduled for spring